Hello, everyone, and good morning. We are happy you all could join us today for the CDM Dashboard training. But let us ponder the significance of today in history and not forget that today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day and Operation Overlord. May we reflect and remember the sacrifice made that day to ensure our freedom. This morning, the CDM training team is pleased to present to you the 4-hour course with hands-on labs, CDM 202, Managing Configuration Settings with the CDM Agency Dashboard. My name is Joe Bukovac, and I am part of the CISA Cybersecurity Division and Education and Training Branch as the CDM Dashboard Training Team Lead. The training today is to provide you with the basics of CDM and the configuration settings management capabilities utilizing the CDM Dashboard to help mitigate agency threats and provide your agency with improved cybersecurity. You'll be provided with numerous CDM resources, references, and lab scenarios so you can maintain your skills in this changing environment. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce today's instructors and share some disclaimers. Today, we have John and Adrian as our instructors. John and Darren as our instructors. John Stuffelbeam is a senior cybersecurity consultant with Motorola Solutions with 15 years of experience in cybersecurity course development and instruction. John has supported the DHS CISA CDM training program for more than 6 years. John served in the United States Navy, where he performed systems integration and combat information center tactical team training. Darren Moore is an experienced instructional system designer and instructor supporting the DHS CISA CDM training program. Darren has more than 20 years of experience and proficiency in designing, developing, and implementing numerous cybersecurity courses. He has served as a cybersecurity consultant in a multitude of capacities, including the academic, commercial, private, and federal government sectors. Now, a few disclaimers before we get started. Today's course is being recorded through WebEx. There is no dial-in for this session, and audio will be in listen-only mode. CISA and DHS does not endorse, recommend, or favor any commercial product or service mentioned during this session. The use case data in our demonstrations and labs is simulated, and no production data is used for demonstration and training purposes. Additionally, please note the following sensitive information disclaimer. Be aware that this CDM Agency Dashboard training event is live and is being recorded and may be made public for the benefit of other students. Events such as these are attended by people from many different federal agencies. As a student, please do not disclose any agency-sensitive information or personally identifiable information during this event. CISA has a commenting policy addressing the rules of behavior regarding chat during virtual trainings. Everyone's input during the class discussion is vital in making the course a better learning experience for everyone. The CDM training team now provides 12 hands-on virtual courses, live in-person trainings in Arlington, Virginia, with the next in-person course scheduled for next month. Registration is currently open if you would like to attend. We also offer dozens of new and updated microlearn videos, which are currently available on FedVTE and self-paced training options. If someone you know would like to be added to our training membership list, where they can be alerted of upcoming CDM training events, or if there are training related questions, please send us an email at cyberinsights@cisa.dhs.gov. At the conclusion of today's course, you'll be asked to answer a few survey questions, which will be in the virtual learning environment. And this is where you will have the opportunity to provide your course feedback. We value your opinion, and your comments help to improve this and all the CDM courses we teach. And we want to thank you for attending. And it's now time to learn more about configuration settings management and the CDM dashboard. I would like to introduce Mr. John Stuffelbeam, who will begin today's presentation.
All right, thank you, Joe, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're glad you could take some time out of your day to spend with us. So to get us started, I want to take just a few minutes and cover some WebEx functions. For those of you that may not have joined us in the past, this might be a little bit helpful. So the first thing we want you to be able to do is hear us. So if you click on the down arrow next to the mute button, there's a panel that will pop up, and that will show you the audio settings that you have, either your speaker or your headset or whatever it is you're using. So just make sure that that's selected correctly. and that should take care of any audio issues that you might be having. Next, we have the layout options in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You'll see a layout button. You can click that, and that will allow you to move the tiles around to suit your fancy. There's also a button under there for a full screen view if you need to use that. And also in the upper center right of your screen, you'll see a little plus and minus sign that will allow you to zoom in and out on the screen as well. So you can use those if you need to. Next, we have the reactions. Now, if you notice down in the lower menu bar there at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little hand icon and a little smiley face icon. Those are the reactions, and we'll be asking some questions throughout the presentation today. So, and most likely there'll be emoji reactions, so because the instructors love the emojis. So rather than a raise hand, we'll say, hey, give me a thumbs up, or thumbs down, or a party horn, or something fun like that. So keep an eye out, and when we ask those questions, you'll just click that smiley face and pick the icon. All right, next to that, you'll see an ellipsis button. And if you give that a click, there's some additional WebEx functions under there, and I believe you can also adjust your audio settings from there as well. The big red X will allow you to remove yourself from the session. So all you have to do is click it, and I think there's a pop-up that you answer, and that will take you out of the session if you need to leave us for some reason. In the far right corner, you'll see a little icon for a panelist and also a chat icon. And the panelists will show you the training team and also the number of folks in the class. So you can see who's on the training team to help you out today if you need to. And the chat function is, you'll want to make sure to keep that handy. There's a little icon next to the X that will pop out that chat panel and allow you to move it around. So you can move it to a different monitor if you have more than one monitor. But we always suggest that you keep that sort of on top of things so you can see the questions or answer questions from the instructors. In the very far right corner is another ellipsis button, and that is where you'll find the closed caption. If you have closed captioning, need for closed captioning today, just give that a click, and I believe it says multimedia viewer. So you click multimedia viewer, and there's some prompts that will come up. You can just click through those, and that will display the closed captioning. Also, in the very far left corner at the bottom, you'll find a little CC icon, and you can use that for the closed captioning as well if you prefer to do that. So, all right, so that's just a few of the WebEx functions to get you started today. As Joe mentioned, there'll be a feedback survey at the end of the course today, so and we'll show you where to find that a little later on so that you'll be able to fill that out for us. We always appreciate your feedback. Okay, so what are we here to do today? We're going to address some of the basic concepts associated with CSM as it relates to the CDM dashboard. Okay, so that's the idea for today. And we're going to start off by providing a brief overview of what CSM is, and we'll discuss the importance of DISA STIGs and how CSM scoring is incorporated into the AWARE calculations. And then hopefully we'll gain an understanding of how the CSM capability can be used to reduce the misconfiguration of assets in your agency's inventory. And we'll also have some labs to complete today. I think we have 4 labs that hopefully we'll have time to get through all 4 labs. That way it'll give you some experience, some hands-on experience with the dashboard, and so you can see how to find some of that information and how to use the dashboard. So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague Darren, who's going to get us started with some acronyms. So Darren, over to you.
Thank you so much, John. And now, as always, my name is, of course, Darren. I am also one of the instructors of the course. And as always, there are a lot of acronyms in any project. Now, in the event that you are new to the CDM program, here are a couple of common acronyms that are associated with the program and the CSM capability. Now, I won't cover all of these, but I'll briefly highlight a few of these for this course. AWARE is the CDM standardized risk scoring methodology. CCE provides unique identifiers to system configuration issues in order to facilitate fast and accurate correlation of configuration data across multiple information sources and tools. CIS is a nonprofit organization which identifies, develops, validates, and sustains best practice solutions for cyber defense. CPE is a structured naming scheme for information systems, software, and packages. CVSS provides the framework for calculating software vulnerabilities. DISA is a combat support agency of the DoD, which is responsible for developing and disseminating operationally secure configuration guides and standards for the DoD. SCAP is a method for using specific standards to help organizations automate vulnerability management and policy compliance evaluation. SCAP comprises numerous open security standards, as well as applications which use these standards to check systems for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. STIGs provide guidance to implement a baseline of security controls for specific hardware and software devices. We'll get into more details on this later. Now, in the supplemental documents folder in the CVLD, there's a terms and glossary document that is quite comprehensive, and it's a great resource if you're just learning the dashboard. So be sure to download it and take it with you today. All right, so let's get started with some background information and basic concepts associated with configuration settings management. Executive Order 14028, Improving the Nation's Cybersecurity, was issued in May 2021. This order required agencies to enhance cybersecurity and software supply chain integrity. Some of the items agencies must address include: identify the proper hardened security configuration for each EO critical software platform and all software deployed to that platform. Implement the configurations for the platforms and software. Control and monitor the platforms and software to ensure the configuration is not changed outside of the change control processes. The EO states that agencies must maintain critical software and software platforms. In this case, critical software is defined as any software that has or has direct dependencies on one or more of these components. It's designed to run with elevated privileges or managed privileges. Has direct or privileged access to networking or computing resources. Is designed to control access to data or operational technology. Performs a function critical to trust, or operates outside of normal trust boundaries with privileged access. This definition applies to software of all forms purchased for or deployed in production systems and used for operational purposes. Other use cases such as software solely used for research or testing that is not deployed in production systems, isn't considered critical. EO 14028 really hits on ensuring systems are managed and configured correctly. Now, before we get into any specific details regarding the purpose of CSM, I want to make sure you have a basic understanding of what a configuration setting is. So, if you can type for me in the chat, give me some examples of a configuration setting. All right. Session timeout. Okay. Set timeouts. Okay. Disallowed executable downloads from browsers. Oh, man. Password requirements. Y'all are flying. Screen lock when the CAC is withdrawn. Excellent. That's a good one. All right. GPO, group policy objects. All right. Disable USB ports. All right. You're off to a great start this morning. It sounds like somebody had their coffee this morning. Now, a configuration setting is a piece of metadata about software or hardware that determines how it functions and how it should operate securely. Essentially, you could basically say that a configuration setting can be used to describe the specifications of certain system parameters. Examples of settings can include registry keys, passwords, a line in a configuration file that is used by a program when executed, or something as granular as user permissions. For example, within hardware, there may be a setting for components such as the CPU, the RAM, or storage devices. In software, there may be a setting used to install a program for the first time, and you may want to change those settings later on. For example, your web browser might open new pages and tabs by default. If you prefer it to open new windows instead, then you can change the setting to meet your preference. Typically, a web server is configured to serve web pages over port 80 or HTTP by default, but those settings can be changed to use HTTPS, which is a more secure option. As we learn more about CSM in today's course, we'll learn why not following baseline configurations can be a significant risk and how common it is for organizations to use default settings. Now I'll turn it back over to John to tell us a little bit about the top misconfigurations.
All right, thank you, Darren. So let's take a look here at the top 5 cybersecurity misconfigurations. So in October of 2023, the NSA, National Security Agency, and CISA released a joint cybersecurity advisory to highlight the top 10 cybersecurity misconfigurations that were identified in large organizations. So what we've done is we've distilled that to the top 5 here. And if you notice, what's at the very top here? The number one issue was default configurations. Things like default credentials, default service permissions, those are the usual culprits. And then another issue was the improper separation of account privileges. And this can allow a malicious actor to move through the network quickly and covertly with one compromised account. Also, insufficient network monitoring and configuration for things like host and network sensors and end host logging. Those are often overlooked by organizations and the tech team. Okay. Improper or non-existent network segmentation. That doesn't leave any security boundaries between the user production and critical system networks, and it allows for a bad actor to traverse the network uncontested, so they can move pretty much anywhere they want. And then finally, and interestingly, I think, is poor patch management and poor network hygiene practices. And these often enable adversaries to discover open attack vectors and exploit critical vulnerabilities. Now, poor patch management includes things like the lack of regular patching and the use of unsupported operating systems and outdated firmware, that type of thing. And if you notice here on the slide, there's a link, and I'm going to pop this link in the chat as well so you can have it. Let's see, there we go. And you can read more about this at this link at the cybersecurity advisories. This is a cybersecurity advisory. So interesting reading. All right. The Mirai botnet. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. How many of you are familiar or have heard of the Mirai botnet? If you've heard of it, give me a thumbs up. If not, give me a thumbs down. Okay, a couple of thumbs down, a couple of thumbs up. All right. All right. If you haven't heard of it, that's okay. It's not a problem. We'll take a quick look at it here as an example. All right. So thanks for that. On September 20th of 2016, Brian Krebs' security blog, krebsonsecurity.com, was targeted by a massive DDoS attack, denial of service attack. And it was one of the largest on record at the time, exceeding 620 gigabytes per second, which is pretty major. Okay, now an IoT botnet powered by Mirai malware created the DDoS attack, and the malware continuously scanned the internet for vulnerable IoT devices, which were then infected and used in botnet attacks. So the Mirai botnet used a short list of only 62 common default usernames and passwords to scan for vulnerable devices. Okay, so basically, that the default passwords, out of the box settings, that kind of thing. So, because many IoT devices are unsecured or they have weak security, and, this short dictionary allowed the bot to access hundreds of thousands of devices, okay, which is what gave it its strength. And the purported Mirai author claimed that over 380,000 IoT devices were enslaved by the Mirai malware in the attack on Krebs' website. Now, currently there are still variants of the Mirai malware floating around on the internet, scanning for vulnerable devices. And if these devices followed the common practice of changing default passwords, this may have been avoided. So let's take a look now at another example, which is the MBIA data breach and the Municipal Bond Insurance Association, or MBIA, which is one of the nation's largest bond insurers in the US. And they experienced a data breach that exposed countless amounts of customer account data. And this data included administrative credentials, customer account numbers, account balances, tax IDs, addresses, contact information, and other types of data from MBIA's Cutwater Asset Management Unit. And during the investigation, they discovered that a misconfigured Oracle reports database, that server was the cause of the breach, a misconfiguration. Okay, and in this example, the database server controls were not implemented, exposing sensitive data to search engines on the internet. So these are just a few stellar examples of misconfigurations being used to conduct malicious activity, resulting in breaches and downtime and probably a whole lot of money, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, moving on. So what is CSM? So why is CSM important and how does it fit into the CDM picture? Okay. So CSM is a capability which provides baseline controls about how authorized hardware and software is configured and how it's configured in the operational environment, and compares that with the security-related specifications developed by the agency. Okay, now in the CDM dashboard, the configuration settings are going to be detected or are detected that are less secure than the policy specification, and the agency will either have to remediate the setting, remove the software, or properly modify the policy. So one of those three things. Now the CSM capability aims to provide a secure baseline configuration for assets such as physical and virtual devices, associated operating systems, any critical software that you might have would be included. And ultimately, the CDM dashboard will identify any misconfigurations and allow an organization to mitigate the vulnerabilities that might lead to a successful exploitation. All right, so I have a couple of questions for you. And the first one, you can type your answer in the chat panel. Okay, how often are your agency configuration settings evaluated? How often do you evaluate your agency configuration settings? All right, Nicole says yearly. Hey, Gerald says annually. Annually. Wow, every 3 days. Awesome. Yearly, okay. All right. So it sounds like annually or yearly kind of wins out here. I don't know that there's any right or wrong answer to that, but as long as they're being evaluated, I think is the point here. Make sure that you're checking your systems and that things that are supposed to be configured in a certain way are, and that they are still, doing what they're supposed to be doing. See Kanban every day and depending on application and use. All right, thank you, Dominic. Interesting. Okay. Now, next question. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you track FSMA required configuration settings? Thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you don't. Do you track FSMA required configuration settings? All right, lots of thumbs up here. That's good. Party horn, because it's fun, right? Okay. All right. Thanks for that, everybody. That's great participation there. Appreciate that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Darren, and he's going to tell us a little bit about CSM and vulnerability management. So Darren, over to you.
Thank you so much, John. And so now let's talk about CSM and vulnerability management. Now, we want to make sure that we don't confuse anyone with regard to CSM. Although it's focused with managing and tracking configuration settings, it's not an activity that organizations should use as the sole means for configuration management. Now, it should also be understood that it's not vulnerability or vul management. Vul management deals with attacks that exploit vulnerabilities in the software. Attacks against configuration settings exploit functionality rather than flaws in the software or the hardware. Attacks against configuration settings also exploit default or out-of-the-box settings or misconfigurations. Cybercriminals are often able to use automated scanning attacks to search for and exploit assets that have misconfigurations. Once found, they can then pivot to attack other assets within the enterprise. Now, as we learned with the Mirai malware, attackers are scanning and looking for default configurations consistently. Not all vulnerable configuration settings are due to out-of-the-box settings. So during troubleshooting efforts, administrators sometimes change permissions on files or services to ensure the security settings are not interfering with the execution of a program or a service. When inadvertently left in place, these configuration changes can leave the modified application open to attack and exploitation. So, can you imagine if there is a network device such as a router and it is configured with the default settings now, but it's not monitored afterwards? What could happen? What would be some of the possible risks involved with that situation? You can type in the chat. All right, hack, extraction of routing tables, timing attack due to misconfigurations. Excellent, excellent. All right. So, well, here's keeping in mind with that, let's give you a couple of other questions. A file server is configured to allow anonymous access to an open share. Domain admins use the open share as a software repository for administrative tasks. What risk does this pose to the network? All right, directory traversal. Good, it's open to a directory traversal attack. Malware placement. All right, excellent. A Trojan could be inserted into an authorized program. Excellent. All right, and let's see. Oh, wow, y'all are flowing now. All right, hold on, let's see. Arbitrary file upload, okay. Excellent. Exposing sensitive information. Exposure of network configuration or diagram or privilege escalation. All right. CEH attack for attack vector. Excellent. All right. Here's another question for you. All right. An agency gives a user a new laptop that still has its factory default insecure configuration. All right. What would be some of the risks involved there? You get a laptop brand new from the factory with default settings installed. Unpatched 0 days. Excellent. Good. Open ports. All right. Known CVE attack. Okay. Excellent. All right. Bloatware. Oh, that's a good one. All right. Account hijacking. All right. Excellent. Well, let's see. You're really sharp this morning, so let's see if we can stay on this roll this morning. A non-admin user account is misconfigured to allow account holders to create new users. I'm going to say that again. A non-admin user account is misconfigured to allow account holders to create new users. What are some of the risks involved there? Privilege escalation. Excellent. Okay. Give me a few moments for a few other responses. And thank you for that response, Dave. Unauthorized access. Okay, good. Access to high-level items. All right, and again, all right, let's see. Oh, the rolling in now. Least privilege, need to know is not enforced. Excellent. All right. Depends if the new user permissions are also allowed to be set. Okay. So we can see, all right, let's see, an unauthorized software may be installed. Excellent. Okay, if they can create new users, all right, they can create a new user with an admin account. All right, and so now you definitely are not enforcing least privilege. All right, backdoor. All right, excellent. And so we see the major point of these exercises was we realize if the system is not configured properly, then we open ourselves up to a host of risks. And so, and thank you so much for your participation in that as well. And so now to continue on, to support NIST SP 800-137, Information Security Continuous Monitoring, or ISCM, for federal information systems and organizations, determining the difference between desired state and actual state for CSM is provided by routine checks on end devices and the verification of configuration compliance status. The actual state is the current configuration settings on all assets across your network. Now, depending on what tools and capabilities are available, the actual state can be collected through automated polling, asset self-reporting, or periodic asset discovery. The CSM desired state is the baseline configuration settings that are defined and maintained in checklists and standard configuration operating system images. The desired state includes establishing and maintaining a secure system software image to build and deploy new systems. This image should be based on government and industry best practice checklists and security guides, whatever those might be for your particular agency. And it should be backed with an established approval process for any deviations from the baseline. Approved organizational system configuration checklists should be established, maintained, and routinely reviewed. Software checklists should be maintained in a machine-readable format to streamline scanning and testing. Hardware checklists should include diagrams to ensure that the configuration process is repeatable and to reduce mistakes. Quality controls should be designed throughout both the software and hardware configuration process to identify any missed or overlooked steps in the checklists. And finally, any exceptions or extensions that may be required should be justified and coordinated for approval. Now, once an agency has identified the differences between actual and desired states, you can then analyze and understand those differences and determine the appropriate corrective actions, such as develop more accurate desired state specifications. Those might include things like establishing and maintaining configuration inventories, establishing and updating baseline configurations for systems, having processes in place to make changes in a controlled and approved fashion, manage deployed configurations, and monitor changes, which include auditing changes against those established in the inventory or baseline, having a controlled process for exceptions with periodic review, having automated mechanisms to centrally manage, apply, and verify configurations, establishing non-persistent settings to protect against unauthorized changes. So, thumbs up, thumbs down. Does your agency use a specific security template to ensure configuration integrity? You can give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. All right. Great job. So I see several of you have agencies that do use a particular security template to ensure configuration integrity. And now, John, can you tell us a little bit about DISA STIGs?
Absolutely, sir. Let's take a look now at some DISA STIGs. So what are STIGs exactly? Okay, so the Defense Information Systems Agency, or DISA, is the DoD, Department of Defense, combat support agency that provides IT and communication support to all the institutes and individuals working for the DoD. And they oversee the IT and technological aspects of organizing, delivering, and managing defense-related information. And this includes providing security technical implementation guides, or what we call STIGs. And these guides provide a reference point, basically, and offer best practice rules on how to secure IT assets. And there's a complete STIG list that provides critical updates on the standards for DoD information assurance and information assurance enabled devices and systems. And each STIG provides technical guidance to secure information systems and software that might otherwise be vulnerable. And the DoD regularly updates these, and they ensure that developers are able to configure hardware and software properly and implement security protocols when they organize training processes. So all that is covered by DISA. So why do we use them? CSM continues to be exclusively predicated on employing the use of a subset of DISA STIGs for integration, automated reporting, and scoring purposes. And this is all within the CDM solution. And DISA STIGs offer a reliable prioritization scheme. Okay, they have Cat 1 settings, which align with general principles within the CDM dashboard that allow agencies to fix the worst problems first. That's kind of the mantra of CDM in a nutshell, is you want to fix the worst problems first. Okay, and this scheme is based on a mature process which is already in place within the DoD. So DISA STIGs are viewed as the highest selection preference across the available benchmarks in the NIST checklist repository. And this is according to NIST guidance. Okay? And STIGs have been and will continue to be maintained to the most current common technical products in use within the government. And ultimately, STIGs provide a uniform measurement for common cyber configuration settings across the government. So there's 3 STIG compliance levels, and they're called categories. And the categories indicate the severity of the risk of failing to address a particular weakness. So category 1 refers to any vulnerability that will directly and immediately result in a loss of confidentiality, availability, or integrity. And these risks are the most severe. Cat 1s are the most severe because they could result in loss of life, damage to facilities, or a total mission failure. And moreover, these vulnerabilities can allow unauthorized access to classified data or facilities, whatever the case. Okay, so if you don't address these risks, you're not going to be able to get your authorization to operate. Okay, that's one of the things that that hinge on Cat 1s. Now, Category 2 refers to a vulnerability that can result in a loss of confidentiality, availability, or integrity, but it's a little less severe in that it can result in personal injury, damage to equipment or facilities, or possibly degrade the mission. So again, a little less severe, but category 2s can easily become category 1s. And then the last one is category 3, which refers to any vulnerability that degrades measures to protect against loss of confidentiality, availability, and integrity. Okay. And these vulnerabilities can delay in recovering from an outage or affect the accuracy of data and information. Now, currently, only Cat 1 findings are utilized in the CDM aware scoring algorithm. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. So some of the key parameters now, the technical scope of the CDM CSM capability at this time is bounded by some of the following key parameters, and I'll just call these out. So Cat 1 benchmark settings only. It only uses the Cat 1 settings currently because we want to, again, fix the worst first. And these are generally defined as settings on software where deviation from their desired state presents severe, potentially harmful conditions. And again, we're talking about the loss of confidentiality, availability, or integrity. And the base value of any CSM defect is 10 when we're talking about the aware scoring. And this is equivalent to a common vulnerability scoring system, or CVSS, critical score. Okay, so it's the highest score that they assign. Now, endpoint operating systems, those are the only things right now that are configured or reviewed. And this is where an endpoint is a workstation or a server, physical or virtual, doesn't matter. Okay, and then the last one is Secure Content Automation Protocol, or SCAP, based STIGs. Okay, so we're only using SCAP-based STIGs right now. And that's, given that the CDM solution is predicated on machine-based device interrogation and reporting to maintain relatively current data in the dashboard. And it's also to ensure a common standard for data modeling and analysis purposes. So let's take a look now at an example. Okay, so this is an example of the top 100 misconfigurations per STIG ID displayed in the misconfigurations dashboard. Okay. And this you can see, or as you can see, it provides the STIG rule ID, which is a clickable link, and you'll see all of this when you get into your labs, what's a clickable link and so forth, as well as the count for that STIG misconfiguration. Okay, the link will take you to additional information regarding that specific STIG ID. Okay, and again, we'll see that in the labs. The rule ID is important because it offers a reliable, unique identifier that satisfies CDM program requirements, and it continues to be the unique identifier employed for integration needs. Okay. And for dashboard implementation purposes, the STIG rule ID is what's used and not the common configuration enumeration, or CCE. All right, so let's take a look now at some STIG listings and CIS benchmarks. Now, DISA's authority is based on DoD instruction 8500.01. And there is a sunset list, or a list of documents that are no longer maintained. And that list also includes when products are no longer supported by the vendor, or when a newer version of a STIG is released. So that information is also available, so you can keep up to date. Okay. Now note that the CDM Agency Dashboard, you don't have to worry about manually downloading the required STIG benchmarks. Those get pushed to the dashboard automatically. So it's nothing that you need to worry about. Now, many times in our courses, we do get asked about, the CIS benchmark, the CIS benchmark. And to provide some background to everyone, the CDM PMO acknowledged the need expressed by some agencies to support their use of alternate benchmarks within the CDM solution. And those include things like the Center of Internet Security, or CIS. And the CIS is a community-driven nonprofit organization which is responsible for CIS controls. And the benchmarks and globally recognized best practices for securing IT systems and data. And in total, they have more than 100 configuration guidelines across 25 plus vendor product families to safeguard systems against today's evolving threats. Now, to assess this need, the PMO explored the option of supporting both sets of benchmarks within CDM, and in general, and for scoring. Okay. And in particular, the PMO ultimately determined from analysis that supporting both benchmarks for reporting and scoring would not really be feasible. Okay, so at least not for the CDM program, because their methodologies are too disparate. Now, however, reporting on the disposition of CIS benchmark implementation to the CDM dashboards without scoring may be considered on a per agency solution basis. And I think they are doing a little more of that now. I recently heard that they're considering integrating CIS more into the aware scoring and that sort of thing. So we'll see what happens in future versions of the dashboard. All right, list of tools. Now, this is a non-exclusive list of different types of tools, layer A sensors basically, that support the CSM capability. And the NIST Computer Security Resource Center, or CSRC, provides a list of validated products, and you can find that link. I think that's there at the bottom of the slide, but I'll pop it in the chat as well. That way you have it. And you can take a look at that, the SCAP validation program, when you get a chance. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it back to Darren to tell us a little bit about the AWARE scoring algorithm. So Darren, over to you.
Thank you, John. All right, so I want to start off with a short video on AWARE. It does a great job of covering the basic concept and purpose. So let's take a look at that. And as I prepare that video, one of my colleagues will go ahead and paste the link to the YouTube version of this video as well. So that way you'll be able to check it out if you have any challenges. All right, and so let's go ahead and get ready to share this video with you.
With cyber risks so prevalent, how do federal civilian agencies identify which problems to address first to protect their systems and data? Understanding their level of risk enables agencies to determine the strength of their existing cybersecurity efforts and make the right decisions to prioritize resources and address problems to avoid future breaches. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, leads the national effort to defend critical infrastructure against today's cyber threats and the evolving risks of tomorrow. By working with partners across the federal government and in the private sector, one of CISA's main tools is the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, or CDM program. CDM sensors and dashboards provide automated monitoring for federal agencies to stay on top of their cyber risk. AWARE, Agency-Wide Adaptive Risk Enumeration, is a key benefit of the program, providing participating agencies with a risk scoring system to help assess the size and scope of their vulnerabilities. AWARE gives each agency a view of its cyber risk, so it can prioritize actions and address the worst problems first. That view is defined as a score. A low-risk score reflects a smaller attack surface or vulnerability level. Once problems are identified, agencies can mitigate the vulnerabilities, patch issues, and then see their risk reduced to an acceptable range. AWARE considers the potential consequences of each threat, making it a valuable tool for security operations staff, program managers, and agency leadership to understand and address cyber risk. Scoring associated with specific vulnerabilities falls into distinct categories covering common cyber capabilities and functions. Currently, AWARE measures each agency's cybersecurity posture for internal use. Eventually, the CDM program will identify how agencies are managing risk across the federal government and complying with federal requirements. In time, this bird's-eye view will also show how agencies are addressing specific challenges, such as multi-factor authentication, and enable them to measure the relative success of their cybersecurity programs. AWARE is a key tool for the federal government to monitor risk, enhance cybersecurity, and gain knowledge through continuous assessment, mitigation, and results. Understanding your cybersecurity posture is enhanced by integrating AWARE into your cybersecurity operations. Visit the website for more information, cisa.gov/CDM.
All right. As I mentioned, that's a very informative video about AWARE, fundamental concepts regarding AWARE. And continuing on, the primary purpose of the agency-wide adaptive risk enumeration, AWARE, is to help agency personnel to determine appropriate prioritization of risks and help them address the worst problems first. You'll hear that a lot today. By providing this enhanced situational awareness based on the observed presence of vulnerabilities, AWARE helps to aid agencies in allocating limited resources on those highest priority concerns and maximizing their mitigation activities. This AWARE score calculation is applied across 3 sub-score categories: CSM, VUL, or software vulnerability, and UAH, unauthorized hardware, to create the total AWARE score. This is presented as 3 different numbers for each FISMA reportable system with assets. To attain a score, there has to be a formula, in fact. AWARE uses a basic scoring formula that consists of 3 factors: base, age, and weight. Base is about what the problem is. Age is concerned with how long the problem has existed. And weight is the criticality of the endpoint, or where the problem exists on the system. The prominent AWARE scores that you'll see displayed in the dashboard are the total AWARE score, or what is known as just the AWARE score, and the tolerance adjusted AWARE score. The AWARE score contains the sum of subscores for VUL, CSM, and UAH. It doesn't factor in the tolerance metric. The tolerance adjusted AWARE score is the sum of all scores with the tolerance factored in. This is comparable to a credit card where the interest is not charged if paid off by a given date. At the end of the period, the accrued interest will come due if not paid in time. Both the AWARE score and the tolerance adjusted AWARE score are reported to the federal dashboard. At this time, we've reached the hands-on portion of today's course. This is my favorite time of the course, in case you didn't know. Now, At this point, what I'm getting ready to do is I'm going to share my screen. And so you're able to go through the steps of understanding how to log on to the CBLE and complete the lab. Also, I want to give kudos to everyone who was able to participate and attend yesterday's tech check. That will make this portion smoother. However, if you were not able to attend yesterday's tech check, then please make sure that you do reach out for assistance in the chat to any of my colleagues. But with this in mind, let me get ready to share my screen. And hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. At this point, this is the training dashboard, the training interface that we'll be using, lms.edsource-training.com /Moodle. And so I'm going to go ahead and log in. And now, if you are a DHS employee, you can log in using your smart card information.
Hey, Darren, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're still not sharing. At least I'm not seeing
sharing?
it.
It's not sharing? Okay, thank you, John.
It says starting to share content.
Oh, okay. What about now?
I see the slide.
Okay, here we go. Hold on, let me switch. Something's going on. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Well, we're not going to skin any cats today.
There we go.
Right.
That's much better.
There we go. Thank you so much, John. All right. So as I mentioned, what we're going to do is you're going to log on to lms.edsource-training.com /Moodle. And if you are a DHS employee, you can log in using your smart card option. All right. For this case, I'm going to log in using non-DHS login, non-smart card. And basically, you're going to use the username and the password that was emailed to you for the course. All right. So type in my username. My email is my username. And my password. All right. And now, once I've entered the correct credentials, I will be emailed my confirmation code. And so I'm looking for my email to pop through, my confirmation code. And what you're going to do is you're going to look in your email, of course, that you use to register for the course. You'll look within your other folder or your spam folder if you don't see it in your inbox. And it may take a moment. Mine just came through. However, one of the things we do want to encourage you is not to don't become too hasty because you don't want to have a confirmation code traffic jam. All right. And so here we have 6. Put in my code. All right. And I'm going to verify the code. And now that takes me to my screen, which of course is welcome, Darren. All right. And of course, if you notice, I have several courses up here, and this is because I'm an instructor. You, of course, will have the course that we have today, and then also any other additional courses you've taken within our environment. So let me go ahead and I'm going to scroll down to CDM 202 for today's class. And you will click on that. And now at this point, you'll see you have your welcome. You have your course lab objectives. Okay, so the objectives of each of the 4 labs. You have the slides that we're using in today's presentation. You'll also have the lab guides. So you want to make sure you go ahead and download those. We do recommend, if you do have a second screen, use that second screen to display the lab guide and your primary screen to work on the environment. It does make the workflow a little bit better, but if not, you still be able to manage. Then we're going to scroll down here. Of course, you have your supplemental resources that we mentioned earlier in the course today. But I want to draw your attention now to your the student range. Okay, this is where we're going to click on to access the lab. And then underneath, we do have the feedback survey, which will be done at the end of the course today. So let's click on the link for the student range. And once I click that link, now you see I have another link that populates. It says CDM Launch and Range. And notice it also has the credentials that I'm going to use in my student range. Elastic is the username, and password with a capital P, all right, is my password. So I'm going to click Launch and Range. All right, and so now I'm going to enter my credentials. The password is, my username, is Elastic. And as I mentioned, the password is password with a capital P. Just to verify, you can see that. And we'll log in. This logs us into our dashboard, our training dashboard. And so now we want to make sure we select our space. So for selecting our space, we're going to select the agency dashboard. So I'm just going to click on that. And this takes us to our agency dashboard. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to our floating panel, floating navigational panel at the very bottom. And I'm going to click misconfiguration. Let me click it again. There we go. So now this takes us to our misconfigurations overview dashboard. The very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change my date filter. Okay. So let's go ahead and change the date filter. We're going to click the calendar icon. And as I click that calendar icon, I'm going to select the last 1 year, okay, from the commonly used options. And now if you notice, you'll see that the data is populating for me. Now, keep in mind, this is notional data. This data in this training environment was basically ingested during a particular time frame, and that's why we do need to use this time frame. Now, in your case, you may use, of course, a different time frame for your own environment, depending upon your own purposes. So now, the next step, let's take a look at some of these dashboards, some of these panels. So first off, we do see the CSM subscore at the top. Okay, this is 16,100. And then we also see the total misconfigurations found. All right. So if you do want any more information, you can simply hover over the I in the panel. So if I look here, so this lets me know for this panel, it's the trend of time over the configuration settings management subscore and the count of misconfigurations found. All right, so we have some trending data here. And so it looks, according to this, that we're making a little progress. We started off high and now we're getting a little bit lower. Subjectively, of course. All right. And so then the next thing, let's take a look at some of the other panels. So we have, notice here we have misconfigurations by the top 5 organizational units. So basically we have the misconfigurations and it's organized by those top 5 OUs, such as CISA, FEMA, USCG, USCIS, so forth. All right. Then we also have misconfigurations by organizational unit. So this is the top 5, but then we have, according to all the different organizational units that we have here in our database, in our dashboard, And so notice you'll see the organizational unit, you'll see the count, and then you'll also see the CSM associated subscore. Then we also have our misconfigurations organized by the top 5 system boundaries. Again, similar data, but organized according to the system boundaries. All right, and we see here, this one actually happens to have a few more than the top 5. All right, and then we have here misconfigurations by system boundary. So again, you have your misconfigurations, your count, and your CSM. And again, this is now organized according to your system boundary. And we'll scroll down. We also have the top 100 misconfigurations per STIG ID. So remember earlier in the course, we talked about those DISA STIGs. These are those STIG rule IDs. All right, and we can see for each particular STIG ID, then we have the count that is listed. All right. Also, we do have the found misconfigurations panel as well. All right, with the misconfigurations. Again, this will let you know the specific misconfiguration. And if I hover over it, we see that's the misconfiguration ID. We have the STIG rule ID, which we had over here. All right. And notice we also have the count and the associated CSM subscore. All right. And remember, one of the things that we utilize this great aware score is so that way we can identify the worst problem so we can fix the worst problem first. All right. So now let's continue on. And so as we continue in our misconfiguration dashboard, we can scroll down again. As we see further down, we have the detected misconfigurations. All right. So as we're looking here, let's take a look. First off, as we're looking at this, let's scroll up here first to the found misconfigurations panel. And as we note, this has the CSM subscore that's sorted automatically in descending order. So the worst score is the largest score at the top. So we can tell from this that this particular STIG rule ID needs the most attention. All right. In this case, SB 220865. We can see the rest. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the STIG rule ID with the highest CSM subscore. And I'm going to walk you through this part. And so now, as we click on it, so we can see here, we have the STIG rule ID applied. This is the filter, okay, for the STIG rule ending in 9.5. However, what we want to do right now, we're not seeing any data, and we do have it for the last 1 year. And so it's appearing no results found for these couple of panels. So I want you to make sure you pay attention to this step here. This is, again, something that we have to do with our dashboard in its present condition, which, again, as I mentioned, is notional data. So what we want to do is we're going to click this last 6 months. And we're going to click on this calendar, all right, for the last 6 months, and we're going to uncheck this apply custom time range. All right. And as we click apply, notice we'll see it populate. So again, I do want you to make sure that we do perform this step because you're going to need to make sure you perform this step in your lab as well. So again, you're going to click on the last 6 months, all right, where you see here. because we do need to change it to reflect our time period. All right, and so because the problem is right now it's using a default custom time range of 6 months, which is overriding our 1 year data set. So we want to close that out, click apply. And notice now we can see our STIG details information. We can see our reference details information. And now let's do the same so we can view our fixed details information. I'll click that, turn off, apply custom time range, click apply, and now we can see our fixed details. All right, and this fixed details panel is a very important panel. And just to note, you have your information here in the STIG details, your severity, high, weight, 10. You can see here in the reference details, you can see that this is this is the subject of Microsoft Windows 10. And we can see, of course, the global ID, reference ID, so forth. And then we also see the fixed details. Now, for this case, sometimes you may see a description for a fixed detail, sometimes you may not. If not, then you could simply look this up in your browser. All right, and so now we're going to go ahead and you can see your detected misconfigurations panel here. All right, you can see this in the STIG details dashboard. So you see your organization ID, your system boundary, host ID, CSM finding ID, even the CSM finding affected software ID. Okay, so that's not a score. This is an actual software ID. In this case, for the first one, it is Solaris X8, which is a Unix system. And so we also have your STIG rule ID here. And then I do want to draw your attention up here. We can see that this is the STIG rule ID. This filter is applied. So we have 640 detected misconfigurations of this. So one of the things that you would try to do if you were the cybersecurity analyst for this, let's say, for instance, a particular system boundary, then you could easily isolate all the hosts within that system boundary. So, for example, let's say we want system boundary 2. We go to system boundary 2. We move to the right of it. We click the +4 to filter for this particular system boundary ID. And notice now we see this highlighted in yellow to show that this filter is applied. And we can also see it here that the filter is applied. All right. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and give you a few minutes to work through your knowledge check. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to just work through your knowledge check, and which is on page, I believe, 12 in your lab guide. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And we'll give you a few minutes. And also, if you do need any help or assistance, then please let us know in the chat. All right, everyone, and welcome back. Now it's time to go ahead and review our knowledge check questions for that lab. And first of all, to answer, I see we have a question in the chat. Dave, no, that is not a crazy question. That's a very logical question. But as I see, I'm just noticing now that John did respond to that. A lot of times our data doesn't make sense. So you may find a Mac OS operating system, Mac OS with a Win Server 2019. All right, because this is notional data. It does not necessarily make sense. All right, but that's a great catch. All right, so with that in mind, hopefully everyone had an opportunity to go ahead and complete the lab in the allotted amount of time. So let me go ahead and get ready to share my screen, and hopefully it will work correctly this time. Here we go. All right, hopefully everyone is able to see my screen okay this time. And so the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to begin our knowledge check question. And so the first thing says, how many detected misconfigurations are on the system boundary selected in the above exercise? So we can see here that the detected misconfigurations is 43 with the required filters. And hold on, let's make sure that I get ahead. Remember, I did some stuff on here. I think we already did filter this. We're good. All right. So, and there was a great point out. I noticed, I forgot who it was, but somebody pointed out that the detected misconfigurations, that it is, the document count is on the left. Previously, it used to be on the right. So we will make that adjustment in our lab guide. That was a great catch. All right, number 2. And again, it may differ depending upon, but this is what we have here, 43 documents. Number 2, modify your filter and determine how many detected misconfigurations are associated with the current STIG rule across all system boundaries in all organizations, excluding the DHS organization ID. So the first thing we need to do is we need to remove the system boundary filter. So we just go up to it here, click the X to remove that filter. And now that we remove the system boundary filter, we also want to remove the DHS organization ID because we want to filter out DHS. So we'll simply, right here at the top, we see DHS. Instead of the plus for filter for, we will use the minus to filter out this organizational ID. And so we see now it goes from 640 to 536. Number 3, modify your filters and identify the number of Microsoft Windows Server 2019 software assets affected by the current STIG rule ID. And we're looking at the total number across all organizations. So the first thing we want to do is remove any organizational ID filter. And we're still going to use the same STIG rule ID, but we will remove this filter for DHS. And that takes it back to the 640. And now we want to use Microsoft Windows Server 2019. So we could simply add a filter here. All right. Or one easy way to do it is simply look here. All right. We see Microsoft Windows Server 2019. Click the plus to filter for. All right. And so now we have filtered for Microsoft Windows Server 2019, and we have a total of 76 documents. All right. And so this is a good way to help identify the Windows servers that do need remediation for that particular rule, STIG rule ID. All right. And now the next step. What is the description under fixed details for the current STIG rule? So what we need to do is if we scroll up, all right, notice, as I mentioned, you're not going to see anything. But if we click on, oh, hold on, let's make sure we have, hold on 1 second. Let's remove, we're looking for the current STIG rule. So first off, let's remove Windows Server. There we go. Almost forgot because I had already applied the settings here. So once we remove the particular Windows server. Now we're just focusing on that STIG rule ID. We're looking at the STIG details. So we can see here, scroll down to our fix section. Notice we said we have the STIG details, the reference details. But if we're looking for the fix information, we need to go to the fix details panel. And we see that here it's just F22, that STIG ID, F22569R 654973 fix. And so normally you would see a description. Sometimes you'll see a description here, but in the case if you don't, you simply can do an internet search, using the search engine of your choice. All right, but we're not going to go ahead and get into that here. That's just a simple, easy add-on if you wanted to do that. All right, and so now that completes lab number 1. And so congratulations for completing lab number 1. You got a chance to brush the dust off for some of you. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to move into lab number 2. All right, and in this lab, what you're going to do, this is using the Kibana query bar to filter the search results, okay, for CDM, of course, for this course, CDM 202. So this will basically help to demonstrate how to use the Kibana Discover tool. And that way you can use that to add your data fields and apply your search filters. This may be a review for some of you. But what we want to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and give you 20 minutes on the timer to work on this lab, and we'll see you back in 20. Hopefully you have finished your lab, and at this point we're going to go ahead and review. We're going to go ahead and debrief the lab. So let me get ready to share my screen. All right. So at this point, as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and debrief the lab. So for the first thing for this lab, keep in mind, as we mentioned, this will help you to understand and practice using the Kibana Discover tool. That way you can easily apply different data fields and search filters, so that way you can quickly find your results. So the first thing we're asked to do is we want to make sure we go to, and let me close this out here. We want to make sure that we click here on the navigation drawer icon. Some people call it the hamburger or the pancake stack. And you just simply click over here and you go to the Discover tool. So now that we're in our Discover tool, which I've already done, you're going to click the new link in the upper right corner. That way it'll remove any previously applied filters. And then the next thing, we want to make sure that we apply, that we're in the in the appropriate data view. So we're going to click on CDM STIG dictionary, and I'm going to go down to I'm going to click, oh, actually I already am there. But what you would do is you would just click right up here and find CDM STIG dictionary. Okay. So then the next thing, as we see, and if you didn't see what you're looking for, you could simply just type it in here as well to find your data view. And so now we want to go ahead and review this table that's associated with the CDM STIG dictionary. We can see that we have 47,000 hits. This is how many documents are in this particular view. Then we take a look at the first entry. We can click on this diagonal arrow, and this will help us to see the expanded document window. This way now we can see even more details regarding this particular document. So first off, we see it's open in table view, is highlighted by the underline. And, if we do want to use JSON view, we can do that. You can just click on there and you'll receive it in the JSON, the JavaScript format. And so now what we want to do is we can also even expand it to fill the, as you see it, we can see it, the entire screen. We can see everything that we're looking for here. Now let's scroll through. If you want, you can even scroll through more pages. All right. And so, but right now we'll just keep it on one for a moment. And let's look at some of the fields that are associated with this STIG document. So we have, of course, your ID, your index, your STIG description. All right. We can also see the STIG group ID. We also see the STIG group rule fix. Okay. All right. And so this tells us if we want to fix this particular misconfiguration, then we could research this here. But if you notice, some of them actually tell you some different things that we can do as well. All right. So now let's continue. From this view, we actually could even apply filters as well. So let's take a look and go down to the STIG group rule ID. All right, so let's see. STIG group rule ID. And so let's say we want to filter for this particular rule or filter out. So let's filter for to apply this filter just for this particular STIG rule ID. So we click plus. Notice how it reduces it down to one hit. All right. So that's also a very convenient feature when we can filter within our expanded view. Now, if we do want to close this view, we can simply do so simply by clicking the X right here. All right. And if you notice right now, we only have one hit, okay, because we have this filter applied. So we can remove this filter by clicking on the X. That'll take us to our original document table. And now we begin to dig into our scenario. The IMO has tasked us to research the STIG requirements for implementing an FTP server that will contain information that's at the high severity level. So we need to use the CDM Agency Dashboard to identify which FTP related STIGs in the STP dictionary index are categorized with security level high. All right, so we assume that you do have some of the basics because this is a 200 level course. So let's take a look. So the first thing we want to do, we remove all the filters. Now we want to add the following fields: STIG group rule title. All right, so let's go here. Let's expand this out. We just click on this here to show and collapse. So we want to look for STIG group rule title. We'll add that. We also want to add STIG group rule ID. We'll go here, click the plus to add that. And then we'll go to STIG rule severity. And we'll click that. Okay. And so we now have our first knowledge check of this section. All right. And it says, what information does the field name STIG group rule title provide? Okay, so STIG group rule title. So as we can see here, so the options are, it describes the number of STIG rules in the document table. No, that is not it. It provides a name or brief description of the STIG rule. That looks like it could be it. And it determines whether the STIG rule is part of a group. That is not it. So the answer is B, provides a name or brief description of the STIG rule. So now we need to narrow these search results to find all the STIG rules for our scenario that have FTP. So what we're going to do is go up to the query bar. And if we want now, we can collapse this so we have more real estate to work with. And in the query view, in the query bar, I'm going to go ahead and type STIG. Oops, mistake. Thing. There we go. Something on the keyboard. There we go. All right, so in the query bar, we're going to go ahead and type STIG rule ID. So STIG group rule ID. Oh, pardon me, not ID, we want title for this one. All right. And I'll just go ahead and type it in, even though as you can see, I already had it completed. So we're going to do a colon, wildcard character, FTP. And so first, notice we're starting with 47,000 hits. We update our search criteria. Now it returns 94 hits. All right. And so then the next thing we're asked to do, one of the things we want to look at, because this is FTP and this is an acronym in the software title, sometimes you may want to use upper and lowercase versions. So if you see right now with the lowercase, we only have 94 hits. So let's add and we're going to do same thing. And notice I just did .t because that allowed me to search it a little bit faster. STIG group rule title, I just went by the .title. And now we're going to go ahead and do wildcard capital FTP. And let's see if it changes from 94 hits. All right, and I made a mistake. I did actually do and as opposed to or. Great catch, Nicole. So let's make sure we have the or. And notice now we have 334 hits. So it combines, when I do and, it only means that they have FTP lowercase and capital FTP. But if I do or, it means either or. All right, and so we see it went from 90, I believe it was, to 334. So now we need to filter the results even further because remember, we're only concerned with the high severity STIGs. So one of the simplest ways to do it is to scroll down until you see high. And let's see, if I scroll a long time and I don't see it, but where I see it right here, so we're good. And we click the plus value. But if I didn't, then I could easily do and STIG group rule severity equals high. All right, that's one thing that we could do. So we'll click plus. Now we have severity is high. And so now we see that. Now let's check question number 2. It says, based on the current filters, how many documents are in your search results? Okay, so let's take a look. So the total number of hits we have is 70. Next question is the STIG group rule ID SV, the one that we have here, included in our search results? Yes or no? So we could scroll through all of these 70 hits to see if it's there. But one simple way of doing it is simply adding a filter. All right. So let's do, now we'll do the and. Okay. And STIG rule ID equals, and this time we're going to do SV, -257. Now y'all correct, help me out if I get this wrong with these old seasoned eyes. 257-207. And there we have it. And notice we only have one here, which ends in 254. So that is our rule. So we click that. It auto populates for us. And then we update our filter results and it goes from 70 to 13. And so now the next question says, click on the blue hyperlink for the STIG rule. Okay, the one that we just found, the 254. So let's scroll down to the one for the, or scroll up for the 254. Where is the 254? There it is. All right, so we're now scrolling to this. It says click on this blue hyperlink. All right, so let's click on this rule, STIG group rule ID, and that will take us to our STIG Details Dashboard. Remember, one of the first things we want to do, okay, so as we're here, we're on the last 90 days. I always like to go ahead and make sure we have the last 1 year. And as we do that, we now have our data that we can see. So let's take a look. It says, what is the description of the fix for this rule? So if we scroll down, we see our STIG details. We see severity high, weight 10. We see our reference details. Okay. Again, here we have subject Apple Mac OS 13. But now let's look for our fix. So our fix detail says configure the Mac OS system to disable the TFT PD service with the following command. All right. And then the next part, we are all set and ready to go. We see the fix. All right. And this is our fix description. And that's all we need to do for lab number 2. And let me go ahead and get ready to stop sharing my screen. Okay. And so now I have completed my review of lab 1 and number 2. And now I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to take you through labs number 3 and 4. Over to you, John.
All right, thank you, sir. So let's take a look at lab number 3, discovering CSM findings to remediate. So what you're going to be doing for this lab is you're going to use the Discover tool again, and you're going to find CSM specific data within a data view. And then also you're going to use the Kibana tool to identify CSM findings to remediate. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll put 20 minutes on the clock and give you a chance to work through these. I think this lab doesn't have a whole lot of step actions, so 20 minutes should be more than enough time to do the step actions and the knowledge checks. So if we could put 20 minutes on the clock, and we'll see you back in 20. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a chance to get through the lab. Let's go ahead and take a look at the step actions. And I don't know if Darren mentioned this or not, but if you didn't finish the lab, it's perfectly okay. We're not, tracking that or anything like that. But the environment, the training environment, will be available to you through 4 p.m. tomorrow. So all you have to do after the course is log in just like you did this morning, log into the CBLE, and then log into the training dashboard. And you can rework the labs, you can try different things, you can just click around and see what you can learn. So take advantage of that resource, particularly if you're new to the dashboard, because the more time you spend with it, the more you become one with it. So anyway, all right, let's take a look at lab number 3. Let me go ahead and share out my screen here. All right, I think we're good. Okay, so for lab number 3, it pretty much starts out the same as before. Directs you to the Discover tool. It wants you to click the new link up here in the upper right. That will clear out all of your prior queries and attribute fields and all that, so that you're ready to go for your new query, your new lab. So step number 3 wants us to select the CDM CSM current data view, which I've done already. And then it wants us to review the document table. So you can see here, and actually let me just point this out since we're here. On the left-hand side, you'll notice you have popular fields 10 and you have available fields 136. So for the CDM CSM current data view, there are 136 attributes associated with that. Okay, and as well as 10 popular fields, because these float up to the top. If you've been doing work in the past, these will float up to the top, so they're easier to find. Okay. But as you see, we have over 220,000 excuse me, documents here in the data view. So let's go ahead and I want to just take a look here, and you did this in your prior lab, but I'm going to go ahead and click this expanded document so that you can see some of the CSM information that's in here. And I just selected the first document in the table, but you can see here there's a number of different CSM finding benchmarks and parameters, descriptions, all sorts of things that you can use to create queries or that you can query on or filter on. Okay, it's just another way to view the information, and in some cases, depending on the circumstance, it can give context to whatever you're trying to do, whatever document you're trying to find. Okay, so that's really all it's meant to do. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and from there it wants us to identify some CSM findings to remediate. Okay, so what we're going to do from the available fields column, which is over here on the left, okay, we have available fields there listed. We're going to add a couple of columns, and the first one is CSM finding affected software name. Now I'm guessing because we've done some work here before that that's probably up at the top. Okay, so right here it is, CSM finding affected software name. So I'm going to go ahead and click that and add that to our report. Okay. Next is CSM finding remediated. Okay, that's right here. Okay, and then the last one is system boundary ID, and that one's right here. So we didn't have to look very far to find these, and that's great. But in the event that you would have needed to locate them, you could search the field names here at the top, and that will narrow down the available fields based on the string that you type in. So, all right. So now we're looking at this in a little different light. We have some information that's meaningful to us versus, a whole 136 attributes that may or may not, be what we're looking for. So with this, we're going to create a filter, and that's steps 8, 9, and 10, which really, this could be combined into one step actually, because I think you've done this in your prior lab, and all we need to do is to create a filter is click the little add filter icon here, this little blue plus, and we're going to select a field, which is going to be CSM finding remediated. Okay, and so I'm just going to type in remediated. Now, I don't even have to type the whole thing. So there we go, CSM finding remediated. And you see how it works. I don't have to type the entire thing. I really like this feature because some of these attribute fields have really long names, and it's hard to remember whether it's an underscore or dot remediated or underscore remediated. So if you just type in part of the string, it will pull up what you're looking for. And now we're going to say is not our operator, and our value is going to be true. Okay. And we're going to say add filter. And give that a chance to percolate. Okay, and now we're looking at all of the CSM items that are not remediated. Okay, so with that, you can see the filter up here in the upper left-hand corner says not CSM finding remediated is true. Okay, and that's really the only filter that we needed to set for this lab. So let's go ahead and take a look at the knowledge checks now. So our first question is, it says, based upon the current filters or your current filter, how many CSM findings need to be remediated? Okay, and so all we have to do is just look right here at the number of hits, 110,000, just over 110,000. Okay, sounds like someone has some work to do, right? 110,000 hits, but that is our, that's where you would look for the answer. Okay. All right, number 2, it says how many of the findings in question 1 are in system boundary 3? All right, so that's a pretty simple fix. All we need to do is find system boundary 3, which I don't think is in the list here. So we're just going to go up here and create another filter. That's the thing about the shortcut, the little plus minus, I call it the shortcut. It works great in our training environment because we don't have a lot of data. But, in your, at your agency where you may have hundreds of thousands of rows, you don't want to be scrolling, looking for the value you need in order to do the plus minus. Sometimes it's just easier to come up here and do an add filter. So we're looking for system boundary 3. I'm just going to type in ARY and .id and system boundary ID. And we're looking for a specific one. So we're going to say is SB3 and add the filter. Okay. And again, as you can see, it's highlighted so we know that we're filtering on that particular value. Okay, and that's all. That's all you need to do to find all the items in system boundary 3. Okay, based upon your current filter, number 3, based upon your current filter from question 1 and 2, how many CSM findings are related to Microsoft Windows Server 2019? Okay, what we can do, and again, we can use our shortcut here because we have our value that we're looking for right here at the top. And all we need to do is filter for that value. Okay, and that leaves us with 2,373 hits. Okay. So you see here that it's very easy to whittle down what you're looking for in just a few steps. We went from 220,000 down to 2,300 with just three steps. Okay. So the next question is number 4. It says here, modify your filters and determine how many CSM findings have been remediated. Okay, that is true. Okay, across all system boundaries. All right. So it wants to know all system boundaries and all CSM findings. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this Microsoft server because we want to know everything. So we'll take that off. And the next thing we need to do is it says across all system boundaries. So what we can do, we have our system boundary 3 right here, right? So if I click on it, I can edit it. I can temporarily disable it, or I can delete it altogether. Now, personally, I like to temporarily disable things because that way it's there if I need it later. Okay, and by disabling it, it's the same as deleting it. So there's no need to, to worry about whether it's been removed or not. It's the same as deleting it, but it just remains here in the filter bar so that you can use it again if you need to. Okay. And so because it wants to know what has been remediated, we need to update our CDSM finding remediated attribute. So we're going to say edit filter, and we're going to say CSM finding remediated is true. And we'll update the filter. And you'll see that once it updates, all of our CSM finding remediated equals true throughout all 110,000 items. Okay. All right. That pretty much does it for lab number 3. So let's go ahead. Let me stop sharing my screen here. And there we go. Okay, I'm just looking to see if there's any questions here. Is there any way to filter the available fields by fields with data? I'm not sure I understand the question, Michael, but if there's no data for that particular attribute, then it would either have a little dash or it would just be blank. And I believe you can filter for that, or it might say unknown as well. So at least in our training database. Now at your agency, I don't know if that would be okay, on the selection menu. You're referring to the popular or the available fields section? Okay. Fields with data. Michael, I do not know the answer to your question well enough probably to satisfy you. But if I could have one of my team members write that down, and we will take that back. Fields by fields with data. Yeah, I think. Yeah, let me take it back, and we'll get an answer for you on that. So I appreciate it. Thanks for the question. Okay, with that, let's take a look at lab number 4. This lab doesn't have a lot of step actions in it, but let's do this. For lab number 4, what you're going to be doing is you're going to open an existing report and modify it and take a look at the CSM information that's in it and then answer the knowledge checks. So again, it doesn't have a lot of step actions. So I think we can probably knock this out in about 15 minutes. Yeah, let's put 15 minutes on the clock. Okay, I'm sorry, Michael, I just saw your remark. That is very true, and that's probably that is probably due to our training data. We don't have 100% of the data in the dashboard, so it is possible that there are blank visualizations and things that show no data found. So I don't know if that answers your question, but you're right. There are probably interesting and valuable attributes, but they're not populated in our training database. Okay. All right. Let's put 15 minutes on the clock for lab number 4. excuse me, and we will see you back at 12:15. All right, let's take a look at lab number 4. Hopefully y'all had a chance to make it through. Again, not a lot of step actions, so I think probably we're okay. So let me share out my screen here. And we will take a look. Okay. So, just as before, we're going to utilize the Kibana tool to open a save search and make a little change, and then save it back. So what we want to do is go to the Discover tool, which I'm already there. I've already clicked my new link to clear everything out from the prior lab. And what we want to do now is we want to open the report. So I'm going to click Open, and I'm going to type in CSM, and that brings up all of the reports that have CSM in the title. Okay, so if you notice, because we use the same image, that's why in the step actions it said to put your initials at the end of the report, the title, so that you could easily identify it. Otherwise, you kind of step on each other, unfortunately. That's a little glitch in our training environment, but anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and open CSM hardware with CSM finding information JCS. That's mine, and that looks like the report, the generic report. Okay, and I did that on purpose because I wanted you to see what it should look like. Now, at this point, it's in step 5, you're just reviewing the information in the report. So you see you've got over 220,000 hits. You're in the CSM current data view, okay? And you're also in the hardware with CSM finding information report, okay, which is, it still has Discover tool functions, but you're actually looking at a report now that you're going to edit, okay, as opposed to just a query or a filter, okay. But some of the information here, host ID, okay, that is a unique identifier that's associated with each host. It is different than the host name, which we'll see here in a minute. I think the host.id is a scan identifier from one of the scans. So that's where that comes from. The next one is system boundary ID. That one is pretty self-explanatory, right? So it's a unique identifier that's associated with each system boundary. Okay. CSM finding CDM category. Okay. This is, it's the means in which a scanner was used to capture results, okay, for an endpoint, basically. Okay, and then host name, as I mentioned, is different than host.id. This would be the actual machine name or the asset name. Okay, so that's the information we're looking at here. So the next thing it wants us to do is it wants us to add a column, an attribute. Okay, CSM finding affected software name. Okay, and I'm just going to scroll down here to see what we have. We have CSM finding affected software name. So it's right here in our popular section. So I'll go ahead and add that. Okay, and all step 7 is doing is just showing you that you can manipulate the columns. So for example, this one here that we just added, we can move it to the left because there's nowhere to move it to the right, but we can move it to the left. Some of these other columns can be sorted or they can be moved as well. So it's just letting you know that you have some freedom there to rearrange it if you need to. All right, so in step 8, it wants us to save off the report. I'm not going to do that since we've already saved it. Okay, but that's what you would do. You would give it a meaningful name, okay, so that you could refer back to it easily. I always recommend to type in a brief description of what it's meant to do. That way, if someone comes behind you and they are not familiar with it or whatever, they can read a little bit about it and see what it's all about, what it's meant to do. Okay. So that is all for the step actions. Next, it brings us to the knowledge checks. And let's take a look here at number 1. It says manipulate the current search to determine how many CSM findings were identified through the category privilege on device. Okay, privilege on device. So we need to know how many findings were privilege on device. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to set a filter, right? And since we have privilege on device right here at the top, all I have to do is click the plus sign to filter for, and that gives us the number of CSM findings, okay, right up here in the upper left. All right, so that's privilege on device. Now the next question says how many CSM findings were identified through certificate-based configuration scans. Okay, so we can remove this filter or we can edit the filter. So what we can do here, let's go ahead, we're going to edit this filter, I think. And we're going to say CSM finding category is certificate-based configuration scans, which is what we're looking for. And we're going to say add filter. Where is my, there we go. And now you notice it's changed, and we have a different number of hits up here in the upper left. Okay. So number 3, how many CSM findings are identified in system boundary 1? All right, so we need to either delete or disable our CSM finding category. So I'm just going to disable it. Okay, and the next thing we need to do is figure out what we have for system boundary 1. And I think, you know, like before, there's a lot of system boundaries listed here, but we're just going to go ahead and create a filter for it because it's quicker. So I'll say boundary ARD or ARY ID. So there we go. System boundary ID is, and we're looking for system boundary 1. So right here at the top of the list. Then we'll add filter. And you notice the number of hits changes, and now we're looking at all of the items on system boundary 1. Okay. All right, number 4, how many documents are related to host 1941? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to, I guess we can go ahead and delete this one at this point so that we're not, it's not in the way. I'll go ahead and disable system boundary 1. That gives us basically a fresh start. Okay, and now we need to create a filter for host 1941. Okay, so we have 220,000 hits. It's not likely that we're going to find it in the list here, right? So we're just going to create a filter, and we're going to say host ID, host.id is, we're just going to enter the value. And once again, you notice there's no drop down this time because there's, you know, it can be a number of different values. So we're just going to type it in. We're going to say host 1941. Okay. Yep, host-1941, add the filter, and there you go. So that's all we needed to do to identify the documents related to that particular device. Okay, and we have 24 of them. All right, number 5. It says use the hardware asset details dashboard to determine the CSM subscore for host 1941. Okay, now I think Darren mentioned this, or it came up at some point. The blue items are links to different dashboards, and while this is highlighted, it's hard to tell it's blue, but if I hover over it, you see it, I get the little hand icon. So I can click this, and it takes me to the hardware asset details dashboard, which is where, if you notice, we have a filter here now in the upper left for host 1941. And we're going to come over here to the date. We're going to select last 1 year. And again, that's probably not something you would need to do at your agency once you once you get your date range figured out, whether it's 30 days or 90 days or whatever. We have to adjust it in the training environment because of our data. But just note that it's probably not the case at your agency. All right. Now, what does it say here? Click on the 1941 hyperlink. Determine the CSM subscore for host 1941. Well, if we look here at some of the scores, all the scores are here at the top, and we have the CSM subscore right here in the center, okay, which is 10. Okay, so you have the vol subscore, the UAH subscore, the misconfigurations, all of this information specific to host 1941. Okay, so that is all we needed to do to find the subscore, was just follow the link to the hardware asset details. Okay. All right, now number 6, it says bonus. What tools and sensors are implemented on host 1941? All right, if I scroll down, a lot of good information here. Hardware asset details, system details, agent details, subcomponent identifiers, lots of great information. But right here, under list of tools and sensors, okay, you can see, looks like it's a Forescout or Fortinet. That is the tool. Okay. All right, so hopefully you got the bonus round, and you were able to complete the lab. Again, if you didn't complete the lab, it's okay. Jump back in later. As I mentioned, the environment is open until 4 p.m. tomorrow. You can jump in and work the labs or do whatever you fancy. You can't break anything. So take advantage of that resource. Okay. All right, let me stop sharing my screen here, and we will get back to our business. All right, so let me go ahead. I'm going to send it off to Darren to get us started on the conclusion for today's course. So Darren, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, John. And thank you for that wonderful demonstration and review of those labs. And so now it's time for us to go ahead and get ready for the conclusion of the course. So let's go ahead and start finishing up. So what does the road ahead look like? This roadmap illustrates the progression of the dashboard throughout the federal enterprise. Now, even though we've accomplished a lot, there's still a lot to come in terms of moving the needle to get us to a threat-based response posture. Now, the dashboard is constantly evolving to a service-based delivery model versus the one-size-fits-all model, and it's continually evolving in how we deliver on-demand cyber services for agencies. The most notable thing is that the dashboard is going to continue to evolve with additional and improved capabilities and delivery models. One of the intended outcomes of configuration management and the CDM program in general is enhanced risk management. The goal of the CDM effort is to use the dashboard to accomplish this. By proactively addressing maintenance and trouble issues, you're able to tackle the worst problems first. And by using the dashboard to regularly monitor and maintain your systems, you're better able to move from a compliance-based approach to a more proactive threat-based approach. So just to recap some of the key points from today's course, hopefully you're able to discuss some basic concepts associated with the CSM capability as it relates to CDM and the agency dashboard. We discussed the importance of DISA STIGs as benchmarks within the CDM program. You got to experience how CSM scoring is incorporated into the AWARE calculations. And lastly, we had the opportunity to gain hands-on experience with the CDM Agency Dashboard and the CSM capability. Now, some of the key things that we did talk about today was we learned the importance of establishing and maintaining configuration inventories. Also establishing and updating baseline configurations for systems. Having particular processes in place that are established to make changes in a controlled and approved fashion, as in a configuration control board. To manage deployed configurations and to monitor changes, which include auditing changes in place against those established in the inventory or baseline. Having a controlled process for exceptions with periodic review. Having automated mechanisms to centrally manage, apply, and verify configurations. And establishing non-persistent settings to protect against unauthorized changes. Now, I'll turn it over to John to tell us about some of the training resources that are available to you. Over to you, John.
All right, thanks, Darren. So let's take a look here. There's quite a bit of information out there for you if you're interested in learning more about the dashboard, and starting with some of the classes that we offer that are coming up. And you'll see those here on the left-hand side through the end of June, I believe. And I'll show you this in a minute on our CISO training site, where you can register for these different courses. Okay. And there's more than what's listed here as well. So, and as Joe mentioned in the introduction today, we have several different microlearn videos and that you can view that with a myriad of different subject matter. So you can, and I'll show you where those are located too. But there's a couple of new ones here, Understanding FSMA Automation. That is a brand new one that just got posted, I think, earlier this week. There's also a Basics of Zero Trust. I know there's a lot of agencies working on Zero Trust right now, so that's a great basic video to get you familiar with Zero Trust if you're not already. Okay, so that's just a few of the microlearns that are out there. Now, let me see. Give me a party horn. Let's do a party horn this time. How many of you feel a little better about the dashboard now than you did a few hours ago? All right, lots of party horns because it's a party. Okay, perfect. All right, well, I feel like we've accomplished something then. So the idea here is to, give you something that you can take away with you. The lab guides, for example, they're written generically, so they could be practiced on your agency dashboard in theory. So it may differ a little bit because of permissions, but give it a try if you can. Okay. So where do you go from here? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the more you practice the dashboard and work with it, the more you become one with it. And as with anything, practice makes perfect, right? So the more familiar and the more comfortable you're going to be using it, the more that you're in there and clicking around and writing reports and so on. Now, we offer a variety of training courses in multiple formats. We have a 2-day course coming up, and I think the link for registration was posted in the chat, but if not, I'll show you where you can get to it here in just a second. That is an in-person course, and it spans either 2 days or 4 days. It's up to you, whatever you'd like to register for, but it's always great to have an in-person course because you have others there that are going through the same types of problems and challenges that you are, and you get a chance to exchange ideas, and it's hands-on labs and all of that as well. So we're definitely excited to see you if you can make it. And then there is a Gov delivery. I thought I had the link, but I don't see it. A Gov delivery link that you can sign up for to get alerts on the different courses that are coming up. And all you have to do is put in your, some simple information, your name, your email, and I believe your agency, something like that, and they will, and then a menu comes up and you select what you want to be notified of, and you want to be notified of CDM dashboard training. So just take a look at that. Okay. Again, as I mentioned, the cyber range is going to be available, so take advantage of that. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Who has a Fed VTE account? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay. All right. That's about 50-50. Okay. Well, if you don't have a Fed VTE account, I want to encourage you to sign up for one because there's a lot of great resources on Fed VTE. Most of our stuff is listed on Fed VTE. So let me go ahead. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you. Let me get to the right place here. Clear some of these out. All right, and I'm going to share out my screen here, and we're just going to take a look at these. Basically, these links that you see here on the slide. We'll just take a look at those. Okay. So you should see continuous diagnostics and mitigation, or CDM training. This is the CISA training website, and it starts off here with a little blurb, and there's some information here with our email address. So any questions about training, please contact us at cyberinsights@cisa.dhs.gov. Registration information, course information. If you're having problems getting registered, let us know. Okay. Now, if we scroll down here a little bit, you can find the dashboard cyber range training, and these are all of our courses, topics for our courses, I should say. I think we have 11 of them now, 11 or 12. So for example, today you were in 202. So if I just click it, it will give us a little blurb here about the course and what it's about, and so you can kind of determine whether you're interested in that or not. So you can take a look at those. Now, this is the upcoming training events. This is where you would come to register for the upcoming trainings that are out there. And this list gets updated about every couple of weeks, I think it is, something like that. So, you know, check it regularly because the courses will change. So today, for example, we have 202 here at the top. So that will fall off after today, but you can see the other courses that are coming up, and all you have to do is click the link here and register. Okay, and the in-person courses that I mentioned are right down here at the bottom. It's 4 days. We're going to hold them back to back. So if you're able to attend 4 days, you will knock out of about 10 of the courses that we offer all at once. So if you can, we'd love to see your smiling face. So please register for that if you are available and in the Arlington, Virginia area. Okay. Next is the virtual learning training environment. So this is basically FedVTE. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a click. And this is the landing page. And as I mentioned, you do need to have an account in order to access it. But if you don't, just click the register here button and provide them with some basic information. I think you have to have a .gov email. You can use, if you're a contractor support, you can use your corporate email. You just have to have a Fed employee to vouch for you is all. Okay, so, and they're pretty responsive. So, you know, if you don't have an account, sign up for one. It's easy and it's really worth it. So let me show you where our stuff is on FedVTE. And that way you'll know where to go when you get in here. Okay. There we go. All right, so splash page, once you've logged in, this is where it brings you. And from here we have the full catalog on the upper left. I always like to direct folks to have a look at that because there's lots of good stuff in there. Not just cybersecurity stuff, there's other things as well. So, you know, take a look at that when you get a chance. Okay, but what I want to point out here specifically is CDM courses right up here in the upper menu bar. And we'll take a look at Dashboard Elastic courses. And that brings us to this page. And this is a list of all of the courses that we teach. And basically what we do is we record each course and then we have to send it for 508 compliance. And once we do that, we're able to post it up here. The only drawback is there's no hands-on labs. It's just lab demonstrations. So, you know, if you're short on time or, you know, whatever, you'd like to come in and re-review what was covered, this is a great place to do that. Here is CDM 202. All you have to do is start the course. You can pause it at your convenience and you know, resume at your convenience. So just know that these are available if you want to have a look. Okay, and next we'll take a look at CDM MicroLearn courses. And lots of stuff on here. This is the new MicroLearn that I pointed out a little bit ago. So take a look at that. Talks about FSMA automation. There's also lots of different subject matters, you know, subjects listed here. So aware scoring, the dashboard interface, the ES6 dashboard ES6 demonstration and overview is quite good. again, just a whole host of things here, and I think the longest one is maybe an hour, but I think the bulk of them are about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. So they're very easy to take in and review. So definitely come here and take a look at the different topics that are available and see what might interest you. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things. One of the things I'd like to point out, go ahead, and I just want to show you this so that you're aware of it. Go here, we'll resume the course. And click this, and what you get is this page that pops up versus the actual video. And I wanted to point this out so that you don't think there's an error or something. But right up here at the top is the full video. I think it's 24 minutes or something like that. And then below are the individual questions. What we did was we had an interview with a subject matter expert on BODs, and we pulled out the different questions that we asked so that you can view just the question if you want to. But I just wanted to show you this so that you were aware. There are a couple of different videos that do this, so just make note of that. All right, I think that is all I can show you here for FedVTE and the CDM training dashboard. There is one other thing that I want to share with you. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. And that is the CDM knowledge base. This is a terrific resource. You can find all kinds of information on here, current information, upcoming version releases, information on that, enhancements, any kind of release notes. There's user guides on here, all kinds of things. All you need to do is request access is send an email to the address that you see there on the slide. If you have any issues or problems, just contact your CDM agency CDM point of contact, and they should be able to help you out as well. I see a question here from Mike that asks, is the FedVTE free to use? And yes, it is, as long as you have an account that you've registered with. So it should be free to use. Okay. All right, I'm going to pop this email in here just so you have it. Okay. All right, and I encourage you to take the slides today because again, I think Adrian just mentioned it there in the chat. A lot of the links are live links, so all you have to do is click it and it will take you where you need to go. All right, home stretch. Points of contact. All things training, cyber insights at CISA.dhs.gov. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, they're going to be the ones that can help you out with registration. If you have any issues or need help with anything, give them a shout and they'll be able to assist you. CDM training team, team lead is Joseph Bukovac at CISA.dhs.gov. And again, Joe is always interested to hear your feedback. So if you have any questions or comments that you would like, you can email him directly at the email that you see there. CDM program office questions, those are for the bigger CDM questions. If you send them a training email, they'll just forward it to us anyway, but there's an email that you can address there to find information on bigger CDM subjects. So, and then lastly is the knowledge base that you see there, the email that we just covered. So, all right. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us. That's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Joe for a few minutes. He's got a couple of closing remarks. So again, thank you, and I hope to see you at a future training event. So Joe, over to you.
Oh, great. Thanks, John. And thanks again, everyone, for attending. I'm Joe Bukovac, as John mentioned. I'm the one who introduced it, John and Darren today. And I want to thank you for actively participating in the course and doing the labs. And also, want to, without further ado, thank John and Darren, who did another fantastic job delivering the material to you. And as John and Darren have mentioned, we want to hear back from you. So there's the course feedback that's in the environment. So please complete that feedback, and you have 72 hours to complete it, and then you can download your course certificate. And your comments help us as the training team as we continually update this material. And just as let you know that coming up, I think in 2 months, 3 months, in the beginning of September, we'll have a brand new course for you on HVA tracking. So a lot of that comes from your feedback, and also the CDM PMO team looks at your comments as well as they look for new capabilities to add to the dashboard. So your comments are very important to us and the CDM PMO. And also, as John mentioned, you can also reach out to me directly with any course feedback or any questions that you may have. And finally, thank you for attending, and hope you have a good afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at future CDM Dashboard training events. Take care.